would like to take a moment and thank our sponsors. We have a volunteer organization largely, and there are a lot of people that put a lot of effort into this, but it really couldn't happen unless we have our sponsors. The price you pay for attending this just wouldn't come near to covering that. So we really thank them, and today particularly RMC for this luncheon, but also LEDWP, Metropolitan Water District, Parsons, County CN of LA, Coachella Valley Water District, Imperial Irrigation District. Sorry, let me get the whole list here so I do this right. Arcadis, MWH Americas, Eastern Municipal Water District, Lewis Operating, Los Angeles County Department of Public Works, SOMAS, Riverside County, Southern Nevada Water Authority, DUDEC, Sweetwater Authority, Wells Fargo Public Finance, and American Geotechnical, Hampton Engineering Corporation, and Water Replenishment District are our exhibitors. Please stop by and see them this afternoon. Thank you so much, all of you. Big round of applause. Okay, fun fact. The Celtics are the NBA team that has won the most NBA professional basketball trophies. The Aztecs will be the college basketball team that will win the most. Yeah, okay, I know. I'm done with the Aztec thing. So before I introduce Jeff Keitlinger to come up and talk about our very deserving Lifetime Achievement awardee, I was thinking about that scene in Men in Black where, if you haven't seen the movie, go see it, but it's basically about some guys that hunt down space aliens, or as I know them, board members. They're not here. So anyway, the older guy is teaching the younger guy, how to do this, and he says, he's going to retire, and the younger guy says, "What do you mean? How can you retire? You're like at the top of your game." And he goes, "You know what? I want to look at the stars and not think, that there's an alien battleship out there ready to hit us. And, I want to look at the Inquirer and not realize that that's hard news, And I was thinking about Pat Mulroy, and I think, is she ever going to look at the weather the same way? Is she ever going to look at a weather forecast and not think about snow in the Rockies? And is she ever going to look at Lake Mead as just like a place to go for water skiing and houseboating? I have the feeling that this is just the end of one chapter and the start of another one. But so without much further ado, I'd like to introduce someone that I know you all know, Jeff Keitlinger from Metropolitan Water District. And if you're a fan of British drama, otherwise known as Parliament, you thought I was talking about Downton Abbey. I know you did, but I'm talking about Parliament. I love it that they have the front bench and the back benchers, right? They have the noble opposition. And I got to think that during the years that they've known each other, that there were times when it was the honorable opposition, and it was, "You're my best friend, let's go talk in the back room." But I'm sure it's been a great relationship. And Jeff, why don't you come up and introduce Pat?
You get into this business and you talk to a lot of lay people, and they don't take Las Vegas as a very serious place. They think of it as a vacation place, and when they think about water supply, it's like, oh, it's fountains and in the desert, and it's a place that shouldn't be there. Pat put Las Vegas on the map as a place where serious water policy is developed and born and run, and not a place that's the joke on the old Johnny Carson or Jay Leno type shows. And that's a pretty remarkable achievement, considering where it is and considering everything else. So Pat really managed to do that. One of the backbencher type stories that just reminded me of that was back when we were doing the QSA negotiations, and California had to get its house in order, and the rest of the basin states on the Colorado were watching very closely. At one point in the middle of some tense negotiations, my predecessor as GM sent Dennis Underwood and myself as the lawyer at the time into the room with frankly, what was a ridiculously untenable negotiating position. And it was sort of a way to stake out an extreme. So we went in there and, we followed our orders and dutifully laid it out. And a lot of people politely just sort of ignored us, but not Pat. She basically just took my head off. And she had the good sense not to do that to Dennis Underwood, because everybody liked Dennis. So I was the sacrificial lamb. But that's what lawyers are for. And so she did that. And I think the culmination of the speech is Metropolitan is a rogue agency. And it always stuck in my mind. And ever since then, we've been good friends. The final point, the one point I really wanted to make for Pat, and it's sort of awkward for me to bring it up, but it's something, it struck me. I had so many employees come up to me and ask me about Pat and what she's doing and all that. And I noticed most of these employees, they were female employees. The female employees at Metropolitan, all basically in this business, they all look at Pat as a role model. And if you look around our business, back in the past, it was a lot of, white-haired white gentlemen. I resemble that remark. But they were all coming up to me, and I'm their boss, saying, "Oh, she's just the best GM in the world ever." And she's my role model, and it's what I've developed my career after. And at some point, you start to feel like chopped liver. But it was actually quite impressive. And this happened, honestly, half a dozen times, unsolicited, in the last couple of weeks when people heard I was going to be doing that. And that, I think, is something that really has to be noted, too. What a best GM, male, female, but a real true trailblazer and an inspiration to people in the business. And so with that, I'd like you to come up, Pat, and accept this nice trophy on behalf of the Urban Water Institute.
Wow. You are going to ship this to me, right? Getting this through security would be interesting. Well, I can't tell you how delighted I am to be back in Southern California, and I was very humbled by my friend Jeff's comments. I will never live that rogue comment down. There's more of a backstory to that, but I'll keep that one to myself. Those were wild times, and I started out in my career having a very different perception of California than I do today. I've learned a lot in the last 25 years. Maybe it's a function of turning 60. You start looking back and you start seeing things in a different light, and you become more circumspect about the things that you've done and the challenges that lie ahead. But it has been a relationship that has gone through a lot of ups and a lot of downs. But what's important to me is that it ends on an up. And the relationship between Nevada and California, in very, very, very large measure, due to the efforts of this man. He had some predecessors whose eyeballs I wanted to rip out. But Jeff has shown the wiser, kinder, gentler, more thoughtful side of the California psyche. And as someone as well respected as he is in the river community, the praise from him comes in as a very enormous compliment and something that I will cherish forever. I thought I would share with you a couple thoughts. I've been watching the news with great interest in my last 8 days of retirement, and I had to laugh. If you watch the weekend talk shows, the Meet the Press and all those political pundits and talking heads, they discovered climate change. I was stunned. It was news. And they all were talking as if they had just broken the greatest news that this country had experienced. Then I fast forward and I read the morning paper online, and I read AOL, and I read the Yahoo News. And this morning there was this great story about, was it this morning or yesterday morning, about California is going to spend what, over $630 million in short-term relief. And in that list of short-term relief was reuse projects. And I'm scratching my head going, okay, they must have found a whole new way to build reuse projects really fast, if that is a short-term response. But it's a different day. Some of you may have been at the Aqua conference that I had the great privilege of speaking at here a couple years ago. And if you'll remember, we had a discussion about a larger water system, one that wasn't bounded by hydrographic basins, but one that was bounded by economies and by user groups. If that has ever come to be proven to be correct, it is in this moment. And I'll go back and I'll rethread that here for you in a minute, for those of you that weren't there. This year, Jeff cannot take a drop off the State Water Project, barring some monstrous wet event in Northern California and in the Sierras. He is 100% reliant on local resources and the Colorado River. Now, the Colorado River has been going through its share of pain and turmoil over the last 14 years. We in Nevada covet that reservoir. As Jeff taught me, it's not a reservoir, it's my forebay. I got a couple of pipes sticking in Lake Mead that deliver water into southern Nevada. And the falling of that reservoir is something that is costing us hundreds of millions of dollars to build yet another facility and a lot of sleepless nights. So here on the heels of last year's bad news in the fall, when for the first time ever, the Bureau of Reclamation and the Secretary of Interior had to announce that the normal release of $8.23 million from Lake Powell to Lake Mead would not be a reality in 2014. That means Lake Mead is going to plummet 20 feet this year. We're sitting right now, someone said at the table earlier, around 1108. I think someone in California had a water order. It's kind of dropped down again. 20 feet from that. So we'll be just above 1080. And Jeff's got no choice. Despite the fact that we're going to get down that low, he is going to have to take water out of storage that he has spent money putting into Lake Mead in order to help prop the reservoir up. Now, what does that mean to us? That means, as you can well imagine, this is politically fertile territory. Although politicians in Nevada try to say they're different from everyone else, trust me, they're not. And this is great fodder for a lot of chest beating, a lot of in-state hyperbole. And so as I left, I told my successor, John Emsminger, that he had one job and that I would be out in the community and helping him, and that's to tempt that down. The rest of us in the Colorado River Basin, no metropolitan paid to put that water in Lake Mead and knew that they were doing it for just this day. So Mead will go down more than 20 feet. It will be a tough sell, but it is one we agreed to and we would want to see happen. Not because we want Lake Mead to go down, but because it brings all of us in these 7 states that much closer to living the reality of a year-to-year adaptation strategy, which is where the Colorado River is headed. We're all going to, at some point, be paying to put water into Mead without our name on it, just to protect the system from crashing. And that will happen in the upper basin for Lake Powell and in the lower basin for Lake Mead. Right now, we have 108% of normal snowpack in the Rockies. However, as I stood in Las Vegas yesterday in the warmest winds I have ever felt in mid-February in Las Vegas, I saw a repeat of the 2004, 2005 sublimation events. And what we have today could be gone tomorrow. So whatever recovery we are hoping for, although it is going to be minimal, might very well evaporate before our eyes. And you need to look at the larger system. Starts in Wyoming, water gets moved out of the basin over to Cheyenne. Come down to Colorado, it crosses the Continental Divide in large tunnels to the Front Range, to Denver, Boulder, Colorado Springs, and to any number of agricultural districts. Come down to New Mexico, it leaves the Colorado River Basin and it goes to the Rio watershed, where it fuels Albuquerque and where the return flows end up in the Rio River. Go across to Utah. Hundreds of miles of Central Utah Project aqueduct take Colorado River water into the Great Basin, into Salt Lake, Provo, Orem, and the Front Range cities of the Wasatch Front, not in the Colorado River watershed. In Arizona, 380 miles of aqueduct to all the central cities of Arizona. Every third person in the state of Arizona is dependent on Colorado River water from the Central Arizona Project. You know what California has to do to bring water from the other side of Lake Havasu to the coastal cities of Southern California, across the border into Mexico, and it fuels agricultural interests and communities in with our neighbor Mexico. But because Southern California is connected to the Bay Delta, what happens in the Bay Delta matters in Denver. What happens in the Bay Delta matters in Phoenix, Las Vegas, Salt Lake City, Albuquerque, Cheyenne, because the dominoes start falling. It is an interconnected web. You cannot push on one end of it without seeing the consequences on the other end. Hence, and this year is a great example, those that doubted that that was true are going to experience it this year. Met has no choice. They have 20 to 25 million people for whom they are responsible and for whose water supply they are responsible, and they have to take water out of Lake Mead. And the rest of us in that basin cannot start screaming. We can't be parochial. We can't sit in Las Vegas and wring our hands and say, oh my heavens, the lake's going to drop even further. What if we don't get the tunnel project finished? It's the reality. But there is great strength in that interdependence because there is a shared stewardship of the system. We all do a very good job of identifying ourselves as citizens of a community, citizens of a city, citizens of a state, and occasionally even citizens of a country. What we never think of ourselves at is that we are citizens of a water system, and we never look at it as a larger system. If this is the new normal, the only path to survival is the strength that that system provides, not by highlighting its negatives or looking for its weaknesses. The fact that some of us can get through to help Southern California, because the day is going to come when Southern California has to reciprocate. And we're going to need the help. or Arizona's going to need the help. And as much as the upper basin doesn't, the reality of it is only starting to develop, they too will be dependent on it. Because even though we can't back water up all that way to the Front Range of Denver, the revenues from power production at Glen Canyon are hugely important to the upper basin. Their banking will be to protect power production at Glen Canyon Dam. Ours will be to protect water supply. Since 2012, since 2012, years are kind of rolling along, even Mexico's become a partner. Mexico is storing hundreds of thousands of acre feet in Meade. But we all know that when shortages happen, they're going to have to take some of that out of storage. We have to, as the water community, silence the strident voices. If we don't silence the strident voices, this can spin out of control real quickly. In Las Vegas, we are getting our community ready to take water that we have leased on the Muddy and the Virgin, albeit not much, or contribute to some kind of common financial pool to put water into Meade that doesn't have our name on it. Difficult concept. Very difficult to explain to the ratepayer. But as we're telling the community there, if the system crashes, there will be no winners. No one will come out of that ahead of their neighbor. If the system crashes, everybody crashes. And it doesn't matter where you are on that system. So protecting that system is all important. And understanding our role as a citizen of that basin and of that water system is going to be enormous for us. It is a real mind shift. I am now correcting reporters. Every time they ask me, well, what about Nevada's share? I go, stop. You're doing it. The media has to be re-educated on the words that they're using. Our politicians have to be re-educated on the words they're using. It's all one system. And that one system will be our single biggest strength. Let me explain it in the simplest way possible. We are storing water in groundwater basins in Arizona that if things get really difficult, Arizona will take water out of its groundwater systems, put it in the Central Arizona Project, deliver it to Phoenix, and leave what they would have taken from the system to give to Phoenix for us to use. Arizona has the ability to have that kind of an expansive groundwater recharge program. And there are pockets in Southern California where you can have it. Mexico has no such luxury. You cannot groundwater bank on the other side of the border. The soils don't allow it. But the fact that we have the ability to look at a much larger portfolio of resources, where we've put some in this groundwater basin, some in this surface reservoir, some over here, gives us the greatest strength to get through what will be excruciatingly difficult decades. The 20th century was one of the wettest centuries in 1200. All our laws, all our allocations, all our agreements were predicated on that hydrology. It doesn't exist anymore. And if it doesn't exist anymore, then all those foundational things that were the holy grail for us in the 20th century have to be let go. Not only have our realities changed, when some of those things were put in place, we didn't have 20 million people in Southern California, 2 million people in Southern Nevada, 8 million people in Central Arizona, not to mention the population boom on the Wasatch Front and on the Front Range. Those didn't exist. We weren't exporting food into China. This morning's big news in Las Vegas is to expect a price increase on milk because of the California drought. This is an opportunity to educate people what this means and how you can't continue to think in the silos that we've all lived in. I did very well living in my urban silo. What was inside the silo was my friend. What was outside the silo was my adversary. We can't afford those adversaries anymore. Because yesterday's adversary is tomorrow's survival partner. All those divisions, ag, urban, state to state, community to community, are counterproductive. And the people that will suffer are the people that depend on us for their water supply. They represent missed opportunities. If there is a way, and there has to be, we have to find that way, to where you are really doing what in its essence amounts to an integrated water resource plan that crosses state boundaries, that crosses watershed boundaries, that links together in a very real way and a very flexible way multiple communities whose greatest strength is their interdependence. If we don't take this opportunity of this drought and use it to re-educate and change people's language and get the stridentness and the harshness out of it, I am done with extremists on either side. I have warned my environmental friends, don't push the human survival button. You won't like it. Those that are locked into one position, be it on the far right or the far left, are hurting our ability to get through. The answers sit squarely in the middle, and they come through listening, understanding, and rolling up our sleeves and saying, all of us together are going to have to find a solution. Every one of us in this room has the responsibility to look at those very acrimonious voices that are going to emerge. Boy, a lot of brilliance comes around when crises happen. I've heard lots of brilliance. To say, stop. That's not the answer. To say, stop. Don't look for the answer at my neighbor's expense. Look for an answer that helps my neighbor and it helps us. The them and us, good cops, bad cops, blue states, red states, Nevadans, Californians, Arizonans. The definition in this reality is around shared resource interdependence. And if we don't change the language, no one will. We're the ones that understand it. We're the ones that have the responsibility to paint a different picture for people. Wipe that board clean of the 20th century. It makes great movies, but it doesn't solve 21st century problems. The answers are a mosaic, a portfolio and a mosaic. with conservation being a piece, projects being a piece, environmental mitigation being a piece, recreational interests being a piece, agricultural interests being a piece. All of it has to come together. So it's not who says it, but what are the issues on the table. The Colorado River community has defied all odds because between 2002 and today, 2014, we have not run to the Supreme Court. Not saying we haven't come close. I've heard glorious speeches about hiring pit bull lawyers, and they didn't come from California. But we didn't go for one reason. Failure's not an option. When I was teaching my kids to drive, I never taught them to drive by sitting in the back seat. The minute you go to court, what you've done is you've given the steering wheel to a judge who has no clue how complex the various pieces are and what the I'm not even saying that they're ill-spirited or that they mean to do harm. It's not their forte. So the minute you go to court, you've said, here, take my car, drive it. Take my community's future, you decide, because I can't compromise. Because I want a winner-take-all scenario. There won't be any winners. There will only be losers. And they can happen on the municipal side, they can happen on the agricultural side, they can happen on the environmental side. That's not how we'll get through this. I can't, in my worst nightmare, imagine going every single year to a judge with my tin cup out and saying, how many drops of water are you going to put in it this year? And if I don't like that, then I probably have no one to blame but myself. I refuse to compromise. I wanted to argue philosophy. I wanted to argue antiquated laws or laws that were brought about under very different circumstances that don't represent today. That decision is ours to make. We can't keep the steering wheel without making compromises. We can't stay in the driver's seat. The only way we can do that is by finding compromise and starting to think about the system as a whole, not as its individual pieces. I will take some more lashings, but I get to do them in a very different way. I get to actually look at them and go, are you kidding me? I give the hard job to John. He has to maintain his decorum. I can freewheel. But we're committed to shutting those strident voices down and helping Southern California be able to take water that it so desperately needs in the worst water year it has ever experienced. That we're a little state, but we can do that much. Let's think really hard about changing the tone, changing our language, and changing how we perceive what it is and what the components and the ingredients are, so that we can say to our communities, we give you a secure water future. Thank you.
I want to talk a little bit about the symbolism of the award that we're giving you. This was crafted by an artist named Carrie Sloan. It's called Water and Power. And the idea was the base is a rock, and when water hits the rock and it plays up off of that and the magnificence of it, but that rock will eventually be worn away by that water. And I can't think of anyone that symbolizes that more than you.
Thank you so much.
That is one of a
Thank
kind.
you.
But wait,
I work out.
there's more. I've been told that you really haven't hit it until you've had a bobblehead.
No, that's Hillary.
No, no. You are ubiquitous on the internet. There are lovely pictures of you all over and they do you justice. This is something she can take on the airplane home. We will make sure that gets to you safe and sound. But here is your own bobblehead.
I can hear my son already.
Yeah. Yeah. You've been
I think I'm gonna hide it. I think it's the only safe thing to do. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.